Australia was once known as the land of the fair go, a country where hard work could lift anyone into a better life. But today, that dream is slipping away. Behind the soaring skyscrapers and billion-dollar profits, a hidden crisis is unfolding, one that's widening the gap between the rich and the poor at alarming rates. Australia's economy is breaking, not because there's not enough money, but because the system is rigged to funnel wealth into the hands of the few. While billion-dollar corporations and politicians profit, ordinary Australians are drowning in debt, skyrocketing rents, and unaffordable groceries. The truth is, the cost of living crisis isn't just happening, it's being engineered. In this video, we are exposing the hidden forces turning Australia into a playground for the wealthy, while the rest of the country is being left behind. How landlords are crushing the middle class. The Australian property market isn't just expensive, it's a rigged system designed to benefit the rich. For decades, housing has been treated less like a human necessity and more like a tool for wealth accumulation. According to a report from ABC News, nearly 50% of Australia's national wealth is now concentrated in property assets. But beneath that statistic lies a deeper truth, that wealth isn't shared equally. The top 10% of households own more than 46% of the total housing wealth, while the bottom 40% own virtually nothing. This means almost half the country is locked out of the housing market altogether, trapped in a cycle of renting without ever being able to build wealth. How government policies fuel the crisis. The property crisis isn't just a result of supply and demand. It's a direct outcome of government policies designed to favor the rich. Two key policies that have worsened inequality are negative gearing and capital gains tax discounts. Negative gearing allows property investors to claim tax deductions on their mortgage interest if they make a loss renting out their property, effectively turning a profit from losing money. The capital gains tax discount allows investors to pay only half the usual tax rate on profits from selling property they've owned for more than a year. Together, these policies have created a two-tier housing market, one for wealthy investors and another for everyone else. According to analysis from the Australia Institute, over 50% of negative gearing tax benefits go to the top 20% of income owners, while just 6% goes to the bottom 20%. The political class profiting from the crisis. But what's even more disturbing is how the people in charge of fixing the housing crisis are personally profiting from it. A shocking investigation by the Courier Mail revealed that 1 in 5 Australian federal politicians own investment properties, including Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. These politicians aren't just making the rules. They're actively benefiting from a housing crisis by receiving tax breaks on their own investment properties. It's no surprise that reforms to negative gearing and capital gains tax have been repeatedly blocked in Parliament for decades. How renters are paying the price. While landlords are cashing in, renters are bearing the brunt of the crisis. Rents across Australia have risen by over 30% in the last 2 years alone. In cities like Sydney and Melbourne, it's now common for renters to spend more than half their income on housing costs, far above the recommended threshold of 30% for affordable housing. Worse still, rental bidding wars, where tenants are forced to outbid each other just to secure a place to live, have become routine in Australia's biggest cities. This kind of desperation creates a vicious cycle of poverty, where renters are locked out of both the housing market and the chance to save for a better future. The human cost of a broken system. According to Homelessness Australia, more than 122,000 Australians are currently homeless, the highest number since the Great Depression. Many of these people are full-time workers who simply can't afford to keep a roof over their heads. Australia's housing crisis isn't just an economic issue, it's a moral one. The system isn't broken by accident. It's working exactly as it was designed to funnel wealth into the hands of a small elite while leaving millions struggling just to survive. If nothing changes, Australia risks becoming a society where only the rich can afford to own homes, and everyone else is forced into permanent rent slavery. How supermarkets are robbing Australians. Every time you walk into Coles or Woolworths, you're not just buying groceries. You're funding one of Australia's biggest wealth extraction machines. Together, Coles and Woolworths control over 65% of Australia's grocery market, one of the highest supermarket monopolies in the world. Despite making billions in profits, these companies claim that rising supplier costs are forcing them to increase prices. But behind the scenes, Their gross operating profits have increased sixfold since 2001, while retail workers' wages have barely budged, according to The Guardian. Where's all that money going? Straight into the pockets of shareholders. In 2023 alone, Woolworths paid out $1.6 billion in dividends to investors, while many Australians struggle to afford basic groceries. Price gouging and fake inflation. A recent investigation by Choice Australia found that Coles and Woolworths have been artificially inflating prices far beyond supplier cost increases, a practice known as price gouging. Items like pasta, bread, and milk saw price hikes of over 20%, even when supplier costs only rose by 5 to 10%. Supermarket duopoly's impact on small businesses. The dominance of Coles and Woolworths isn't just squeezing shoppers, it's destroying small businesses. These supermarket giants use their market power to undercut smaller competitors, demand exclusive supply contracts, and pressure farmers into selling at lower prices. According to the National Farmers Federation, many farmers receive as little as 10 cents for every dollar shoppers spend on fresh produce, while supermarkets pocket the rest. The cost of corporate greed. As Coles and Woolworths rake in billions, 1 in 5 Australians are skipping meals due to the cost of living crisis from ABC News sources. Food insecurity is rising at the fastest rate in decades, with charities like Food Bank reporting that demand for food relief has doubled since 2020. Australia's supermarket duopoly isn't just hurting consumers, it's driving a widening gap between the rich and poor, turning everyday groceries into a luxury that many can no longer afford. Mining giants and tax evasion. Australia's mining sector has always been one of the most profitable industries. But what if we told you that many mining companies are barely paying taxes at all? According to Mine Australia magazine, nearly half of Australia's biggest mining and energy companies paid zero corporate tax in the 2021 to 22 financial year, despite making billions in profits. This loophole exists thanks to generous tax deductions, depreciation allowances, and profit-shifting techniques that allow corporations to report minimal taxable income. A report by the Tax Justice Network, taxjustice.org, revealed that mining giants like BHP and Rio Tinto have shifted billions of dollars in profits to low-tax jurisdictions like Singapore, significantly reducing their tax bills in Australia. Even when mining bosses get caught, the system protects them. Recently, Chris Ellison, one of Australia's richest men and founder of Mineral Resources, admitted to failing to disclose overseas revenue to the tax office. His punishment? A slap on the wrist, with no significant consequences for his massive tax evasion. Meanwhile, ordinary Australians are burdened with increasing income taxes and the rising cost of living. To make matters worse, many mining companies benefit from billions of dollars in government subsidies. The Australia Institute estimated that the fossil fuel industry alone received $11.6 billion in subsidies in the 2022-23 financial year, public money that could have been invested in healthcare, education, or housing. These subsidies include diesel fuel rebates, infrastructure grants, and royalty discounts, all while mining companies continue to rake in record profits. Furthermore, mining corporations often exploit indigenous land without fair compensation. A report by Human Rights Law Center exposed how mining companies like Rio Tinto destroyed sacred indigenous sites, such as the Juukan Gorge Caves in 2020, an act that sparked outrage but resulted in little more than public apologies. These actions highlight how the wealth generated from Australia's natural resources benefits corporations while marginalised communities are left with environmental destruction and little financial gain. The concentration of power in the hands of a few mining conglomerates also leads to political influence. Transparency International has raised concerns about the close ties between the mining industry and Australian politicians, with millions of dollars flowing from mining lobby groups into political donations. This influence allows mining companies to shape policies in their favor, further entrenching their dominance and widening the gap between the rich and the poor. This rigged system allows the wealth generated from Australia's natural resources to flow into the hands of a few powerful corporations, while the rest of the population bears the cost. The result is a society where the rich get richer, the environment suffers, and everyday Australians are left struggling to make ends meet. Who really pays the price? While landlords, supermarket owners, and mining executives hoard billions, ordinary Australians are paying the price. 1 in 6 Australians are now living in poverty. Food prices have increased by more than 30% in the last 2 years. Homelessness is at its highest level since the Great Depression. And according to the Australia Institute, corporate lobbying is one of the biggest reasons these industries continue to get away with it. Australia's export economy, how the country owns its wealth. Australia's economy heavily relies on exporting natural resources. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, Australia's top 4 exports are iron ore, coal, natural gas, and gold, all extracted primarily by large mining corporations. These 4 commodities alone account for more than 60% of the country's total export revenue. Iron ore. Australia is the world's largest exporter of iron ore, generating over $130 billion in export revenue in 2022 to 23. The majority of this wealth flows to companies like BHP, Rio Tinto, and Fortescue Metals, while the profits are often funneled offshore through tax avoidance schemes. Coal. Coal remains one of Australia's biggest exports, bringing in around $118 billion annually. Despite global pressure to transition to clean energy, Australia's coal industry continues to thrive, largely due to government subsidies and strong lobbying from mining corporations. Natural gas. Australia is one of the largest exporters of liquefied natural gas, LNG, earning approximately $90 billion per year. However, most of these profits are captured by multinational corporations, with little benefit to ordinary Australians due to lax tax laws and offshore profit shifting. Gold. Gold exports contribute around $20 billion annually to Australia's economy, with a majority of production controlled by foreign-owned companies like Newmont Corporation and Barrick Gold. While these exports contribute significantly to Australia's GDP, the distribution of wealth is highly unequal. Most profits end up in the hands of corporations and wealthy investors, not in public infrastructure, social programs, or wage increases for everyday Australians. How Australia's export model compares to third world countries. Australia's reliance on exporting raw materials is strikingly similar to the economic models of many third world countries. Nations like Nigeria, Venezuela, and South Africa also depend heavily on natural resource exports, often resulting in wealth concentration among elites while the broader population faces poverty and inequality. This phenomenon, known as the resource curse, occurs when countries with abundant natural resources fail to translate that wealth into widespread economic development. Instead, profits are siphoned off by corporations and corrupt elites, leaving the majority of citizens struggling with rising living costs, stagnant wages, and crumbling public services. Is Australia heading toward becoming a third world economy? If current trends continue, Australia risks sliding into what economists call a rentier economy, where wealth is generated primarily through rent-seeking activities like property speculation, resource extraction, and corporate profits, rather than through innovation or productivity. According to the Australian Council of Social Service, wealth inequality in Australia is at its highest level in decades, with the top 20% of households owning 90 times more wealth than the bottom 20%. With the cost of living skyrocketing and wages stagnating, more Australians are falling into poverty while a small elite class hoards the nation's wealth. If Australia continues down this path, where corporations extract wealth, evade taxes, and manipulate government policies, the country could indeed resemble many third-world economies, where a small handful of elites thrive while the majority struggle to survive. What can we do? The system is rigged, but that doesn't mean we have to accept it. Support independent supermarkets and local businesses. Demand rent caps and housing reform. Vote for politicians who prioritize wealth redistribution, not corporate interests. Spread awareness by sharing this video. The more people know about how the rich manipulate the economy, the harder it becomes for them to hide. Australia's economic crisis isn't just bad luck, it's by design. A handful of powerful corporations, landlords, and politicians are pulling the strings, extracting wealth while everyday Australians are left behind. The more we stay silent, the more they profit. But understanding the truth is the first step to demanding change. If you're tired of seeing the rich get richer while the rest of us struggle, share this video and let others know how the system really works. The fight isn't over, it's just beginning.